Jana has.
So Jana is here, participating. We're broadcasting the meeting now, so...
Maybe I'm still on. Getting better balance. Yeah.
You brought that 180 from back east. Yeah. You still have that. Just so they can we go.
Okay, we are broadcasting literally everything.
Good morning, Jeff. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Good. That's what I like to hear.
You?
Yeah, great. Thanks.
So you had a meeting at the airport? Good to see that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we were doing an after-action review from the fire season, getting council's feedback on kind of what their pain points were and how we can implement some suggestions and improvements.
Some suggestions and improvements?
So what is Stephanie doing, or do I need to watch this?
We'll get started on the meeting today. Welcome everybody. I'd like to welcome Greg Vesner. I think most people know Greg, but this is the first meeting that we've had in person. So, welcome.
Thank you.
If you have the minutes, you can adopt the minutes of the previous meeting. Andrew, was there a question?
Pardon me?
Was there a question?
No.
Okay.
Kurt, could you bring the microphone in a little bit closer?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Sorry.
And your worship, I would just ask if everyone could please use their microphone, and I will fix any problems as they arise.
Everything okay?
Everything's okay, thank you.
Well, yes.
Oh, okay, so do we need to start again?
Not at all.
Oh, okay, so we're on to number 2, the adoption of the minutes, so I could have a recommendation that the minutes of the Airport Advisory Committee held on August 12th, 2021 be adopted. Jeff and Ray. All in favor? So moved. So we'll move right along to staff updates, and we've got a report, I believe, for the airport fencing and lighting projects, and is that on?
I'll take it. There might be elements that Andrew jumps in on as well.
All right.
If you can just hit the button for me there, Kurt. Perfect. Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Good to be here today. Wanted to provide you a little bit of an update as to what the plan is moving forward for the airport fencing and lighting project. And for sake of convenience, Councillor Christopherson, if I can also sort of merge this with a little bit of the hangar and leasing opportunity discussion, because it all is blending together. So, as this committee is aware, the recommendation was put forward to develop an airport fencing and lighting plan so that we can make sure that this is part of the 2022 capital budget and seek grant funding for that project. The primary grant that we are anticipating is going to be dropped at some point here soon is the BC Air Access Program grant. It tends to run as an annual grant, but we haven't seen the 2021 iteration of that grant come out yet. We've got a consultant on board. We'll be ready to make an application for that grant. Deadline for it generally tends to fall in January, is the grant deadline date. But either way, what we wanted to propose is that we will have the airport fencing and lighting project in the 2022 capital budget that gets put forward to council. But we will not make this a grant-dependent project. That means that if we're unsuccessful in getting the air access grant, then we would still continue to proceed to do the airport fencing and lighting as part of the 2022 capital project year. That's the plan that we're moving towards. We're also looking at some potential secondary sources of funding as well. I don't know, council and the committee may be aware, but there's an organization called ETSI that they have grant funding available for economic development initiatives, and the city has actually received a grant for one particular initiative to assist with the development of an industrial park master plan. But they have also, we've been in conversations with them, and they also feel that kind of a project to assist with the commercialization of the airport through fencing, lighting, and paving would be eligible. The challenge is, timing-wise, we really do need to see some movement probably on our the first grant that we recently received before we would be eligible to be successful for the second. That's not a guarantee, but just some of the feedback that we had and preliminarily. So what we're going to do is keep our eyes open for those grant opportunities and proceed with the project. We've got the consultant on board that's put in a proposal. We're going back and forth still on costs and trying to bring that down. That's for the development of the plan itself, but we understand that'll be a pretty quick turnaround and process. So we're well underway, and the committee and council can anticipate that will be a 2022 capital project there. Part of the reason this is important for us is we've also had 2 inquiries now regarding potential lease lots at the airport, which is really exciting news. I was speaking with John Lauder and now speaking with, he's directed me to Bruce Chernoff. And so there's some interest in potentially leasing city parcels at the airport. As you guys know, we do have 3 parcels that are still unleased on the south side of the airport, and then there's a number of private parcels in addition to 2 city-owned parcels that are on the north. You guys are going to have to forgive me. The north side of the airport.
And so we are looking to activate those, but part of the ability to do that is these folks want to see fencing, lighting, but they also want to make sure that the rest of that taxiway, kind of all the way around on the south side, is paved. And this is one piece where I would love some advice of the committee as to what width, because I think I've heard that it doesn't need to be the whole width that's there, but that there needs to be, that there's kind of a minimum acceptable width in order to make sure that we've got an adequate taxiway on that south side. So any feedback or advice from the committee on that front would be really beneficial, because we're going to use that to price the project as part of our upcoming capital project. So is there any feedback on that point as to what the width is? As it stands right now, I think you guys can imagine part of it is basically like half paved on a portion of it right now. Is keeping that same width acceptable? Does it need to be wider than that? Love your thoughts.
Do you have any? Great.
Yeah. If the aerodrome is certified, so with Transport Canada, so that you can have, if it's certified as opposed to non-certified, then you can have certain types of aircraft coming in, and they're guaranteeing a certain standard of the airport. So clearance on track, taxiways, clearance from buildings. So there is a standard, and I could get it from cars. It's just a section under aerodrome certification, and it talks about distances that the aircraft hangars or taxiways have to be from other buildings or fuel tanks. So I could give you a copy of that. It's important if you're going to expand and move forward with a certified airport aerodrome where aircraft can come in and they're guaranteed certain approaches, eventually night landing, IFR approaches. You want to start meeting those standards now, as opposed to years down the road have to rip up a bunch of taxiways and make them wider, or move a building that may be 2 meters too close to a taxiway. Yeah.
Just one question, because I understand that we're not a certified aerodrome. We are registered, but we're not certified. And I've had it explained to by some of you a number of times here as to some of the differences that constitutes. But I think what you're saying is if there was kind of a vision to become certified in the future, you need to make provisions for that. The direction we previously kind of received from the committee is we wanted to allow for some future growth that would kind of ultimately facilitate a larger population and more commercial activity, but that there still was not necessarily intent that we would ever become a certified aerodrome. Was the discussion previously, and I think council had even passed a resolution to that effect. And so that's kind of the current state of where we're at least by my recollection and knowledge.
It's an easy standard to meet if you start now. It doesn't change anything, just in your development and planning stages. If you're aware of a measurement or a standard, it's easy to meet that because you guys have a great big wide open space. You just don't want to sell a lot and have that leasee put their hangar on the end of a leased lot as opposed to maybe the middle, and suddenly they're just a little too close to the runway that in the future you can't expand without moving their hangar or something. So you just have to maybe be aware of this condition, and maybe you put that in the leasee's whole, if you're going to build a building, it has to be offset by a certain amount. I mean, they might not like that, but at least if you're aware of it, you don't have to be surprised by it later in the future. Like, why didn't we have them offset the building a couple extra meters? Something simple. It's the planning part of it is really, really basic. It's just a couple of numbers. It's buildings and taxiways with width. So it's not a complicated formula to build an airport. That, with respect to that certification, it's just if you're aware of it now, it makes it a lot easier down the road.
Sean, my recommendation.
Push your button.
Oh, sorry. My recommendation would be to kind of pave what you currently have, because you already have most of the work done. I think you could just put asphalt on top of what you currently have. There's a couple of reasons you want to do that even now. This last summer we had 14 helicopters based there, and there was a fight about who could have the helicopter on the paved parts and who could have the helicopters on the taxiways, because as one guy said, if you drop a bolt in gravel,
Yeah.
you're looking for half an hour. And so there was a bit of jostling and moving around of helicopters as people were fighting for the nice spots. So Paving the Taxiway does have two advantages. One is you can actually taxi aircraft on it. A lot of pilots do not like to taxi on gravel because the prop picks up little rocks and dings your propeller. And the second is helicopters. It throws a lot of dust up, especially when they're landing on that taxiway, and throws it kind of everywhere all over the airport. On the width issue, Greg has mentioned there's the whole certified issue, and we fought over that for almost 2 years. But we want, I think you have a base, put some asphalt on top of that, make sure that base is good, put some asphalt on top of that. I think the spacing is already good. And we're not going to become a 737 base. We don't have the 737 large aircraft because our runway can't handle that. And so that's my recommendation, is just pave what you have.
Greg, could you pull up the Muni site map from that on your end? Or otherwise I can do it and just pull it in with HDMI, but I think that will
Cause many disasters.
Yeah, I'll let you pull it up. Just, I want to make sure that we're talking apples to apples, and I completely understand what.
Is it still online?
Just now.
Oh, okay. I just saw it.
Although I say that, we are having a Unisite problem. So.
All right. Google.
Jana is the, oh yeah. If Google Earth will do, then let's do that. I was just thinking maybe Jana could pull up her super sophisticated version.
All right. So what you're saying here is pave the whole width where the base has been prepared of the taxiway, because right now we've got it paved like kind of
Right to there.
half right here, but going half the whole way doesn't make sense. You're saying let's just do it as the whole strip. Is that what I'm hearing, or is just
Correct.
continuing this sufficient?
So I would recommend
We're pointing fingers. This isn't going to be very helpful.
I'm using the
I would
mouse.
pave this whole area from, because you stop paving here.
Yeah.
If you could pave this all, wherever it's all,
Yeah.
because all the helicopters were parking on this side, and they were driving their trucks on this side, this last summer. So they need a place to park the helicopter and then drive the mechanic's truck up. And so if you use the taxiway for that purpose,
Okay, is the committee in agreement that really the whole thing should be paved then? That's what needs to happen? Okay.
now at a bare minimum, it's all down to cost, right? At bare minimum, that's all you need for an aircraft. But ours is a massive forest fire helicopter base also,
Okay.
and they ran out of parking spots this last summer.
So what we'll do then, we hear what the committee's saying on this. Andrew, maybe when we prepare this for council, let's prepare costing for the strip, costing for the whole bit, and we can just put it to council with an acknowledgement that the recommendation from the committee was to do the whole thing if it works from a financial perspective.
Do you need a motion to that effect from this body, or leave it as a recommendation from the staff?
I think at this point, given it's just going to be the information that we use to prepare the budgetary document, we wouldn't need any further information on that. But that is really helpful, because when we were looking at it, I don't know what the best practice is going to be. So thank you for providing that information. The advantage, actually, Greg, if you can pull that up one more time, I'll talk a little bit about this and some of the changes that have happened. So the city's parcels, well, this is a very old picture. Not having.
the white area is the forestry now.
Yeah. So basically, we've got 3 parcels here, two smaller ones, and then one longer one that runs the stretch. We had market rate leases prepared for this in 2016. Those lease rates were quite low. I think that they were adequate for the time, but lease rates have gone up significantly since then. So in 2016, it was about 13.5, 85 and 85 for those two parcels on an annual basis. What we've done is adjusted that to reflect kind of the increase in the land value and just basically retroactively applied that to the lease rates as well. So we're proposing a fair land lease rate of $20,000 for the larger parcel, $13,500 for this, and $13,500 for the two smaller. And the parties that have approached us so far do see that as being quite reasonable. We would have inflation adjustment with these. You compare that to some of the other leases that the city has in there. I think that's much closer to a fair value for the taxpayers, while still providing some incentive for development of the area. The other thing that you guys will know is because of on the nose here, you'll probably all will have seen it, the septic disposal station there. We had to do a number of hydro upgrades along Airport Road in order to make that happen. So these landowners, whether they know it or not now, all of these parcels are much more serviceable at a lower cost than they were historically, because we had to upgrade the hydro in order to get there. So the north end of the parcel, the north end of the runway, really is in a good position right now to see some airport-related development. What we've heard from this committee is that there is a desire to see airport-related uses along the runway. As you guys have seen and we've talked about historically, there was a mix of service, commercial, industrial type uses in among the airport uses. So what I think we've seen and taken as feedback, and you'll see it in the draft official community plan when it comes forward, is that the aspiration is that those will be used for an airport purpose. And we think that with the OCP amendment having already been in place to allow runway access, private access from those parcels, we think that we're in a spot right now where by making some of these upgrades, we're really going to allow for the commercialization of the airport, frankly. And we're excited to see what that is going to be able to bring for our community. We think it's been an underutilized asset for a very long time, and that this should hopefully increase the economic activity generated by our airport. So that's sort of the staff report on our end. Any questions that you have, I am happy to answer.
We're doing fencing, lighting, and hangers all at the same time?
Hangers
It's
will...
also a point on the agenda.
Hangers was one of the items we'll talk about in 8.3, but if you're okay with that, Councillor Christopherson, I can talk hangers now as well.
Unless there are any other questions about the topic at hand. Yeah, let's move on.
Yeah, Jeff's aware because I actually got his feedback initially on this, but we did go out and get pricing for steel hanger, steel frame hanger design. The budget, the quote came in quite a bit higher than we expected. It was, $800,000 to $900,000 for. Was that one an 8-bay T hanger?
Oh, I believe.
I want to say that one was 8. Yeah, it was 8. And we were looking at that on. I'm sorry, Greg. Is the map still up? Yes. We were considering that for this site in particular as being a good spot on city land. Talking with Jeff, there might be some other opportunities out there to reduce costs with alternate hanger designs, alternate companies. But I'm not. At those costs, I don't know if it's going to make the 2022 budget round. Again, we're going to put the information forward to the council, but there's a lot of competing priorities right now. If the costs come in lower with some of the design we get, maybe that makes it more likely that we'll see that funding. Part of what we're focusing on right now is acknowledging that if we can enable our land to create some private hangars that other people will be able to use, it's going to take some of the pressure off, but we're still going to be exploring the potential use of hangars on that site. So there will be some information for council on this one, but I think that at least from staff's side, this would be a lower priority than the fencing, lighting, and paving. But that's just my opinion. And so other people will have the opportunity to weigh in on that. I think that if we create more opportunity on the private side and get some people who are developing hangars on their own, it might take some of that pressure off, but it doesn't mean that we don't want to explore it on the public side as well. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Even if it's maybe not the answer you were hoping for.
If I can speak to that for a second, you called me and asked me about that bid, and I kind of did a couple searches. For hangars of using a post and beam kind of construction, wood, not steel, with aluminum cladding, with roller doors, not the bifold doors, I was getting quotes at about $45 to $50 a square foot, and that's complete. So with the roof, cladding, the doors, everything, so $45 to $50 a square foot.
Yeah, and
That
that
was
was
substantially cheaper than the steel one you were saying. And that's what most, if you go to Kelowna, that's most of their private hangars are kind of post and beam type construction, because it's much cheaper.
So I think that what we'll do is we'll provide, and you did provide the company that you had talked with out of Alberta there that did that. And so I think that we will see what we can do to reach out to a couple others and get some other budgetary information for council as part of this year. Because again, steel frame is great, but if there's a way that we can make this a little bit more economical, ultimately, it didn't look to me, and from our conversation like that, has a huge impact on the lease rates themselves. So in terms of investment, if the longevity of the building is not hugely affected, the lease rates aren't hugely impacted, then it makes sense to be pursuing your lowest cost construction option in this instance. Does that seem like kind of the direction that makes sense for the committee generally, or do you have any other advice as to materials types that we should be considering?
I just, because I wasn't at the last couple of meetings, I just wanted to know why, maybe to say clear, are you, is it set, the plan is to build hangars and then lease it, as opposed to some other airports that say, you build your own hangar and you pay the lease on the land, the space. Because it kind of goes both ways, and you don't want to get a mishmash of hangars with everyone building where they want, but you have a standard, and sometimes then you don't have the capital expense, the owners, and then they have the ability to sell their hangars to somebody else when they stop flying for whatever reason. And there's not as big a capital output. The people that lease the land have to build their own hangar to their own standard, but then they have the right to sell it.
Correct. So here, these are leasable parcels for the city, and it would primarily be private parties constructing their own hangars using their own funds to build whatever they want. This isn't actually a parcel, so we don't have the ability to lease this land. So what we had considered is these would be the ones where it was private development of the hangars, but we wanted to at least consider the option, does it make sense for the city to explore directly constructing a hangar and then leasing out the hangar bays to have kind of a public-private mix. There hasn't been any decisions one way or the other on that. It's all exploratory at this point. The other thing to note is in the 2006 airport plan, this site here was designated as kind of the helipad, heliport area, and so we don't want to lose sight of that as a potential, and so there is going to have to be some weighing of options as to what makes sense in the long run.
So what would it take to actually make that land available for lease? What would be the process?
It probably could be done. It's a subdivision process. The issue is that with access to the parcel, and anytime you subdivide a parcel, you have to have access to it. So there needs to be some form of extension of Airport Road formally, because Airport Road terminates here in that parcel. So I'm not saying it couldn't happen, but it probably makes the most sense to leave it as part of the larger airport parcel and just have the asset built on it. But I haven't explored it fully.
So, but really, either way, you have to have access, and the logical place for access is along that ditch line there, to put a road up in there. But either way, you have to have access.
But if we do it the other way, could it not be access off of the apron?
Well, do you want people driving on the apron? Because people will want to get their vehicles in there.
Well, this is good feedback. I would love your thoughts and suggestions, because maybe I wasn't fully understanding this.
I don't think there's a problem with driving on the apron. Every airport does it. Especially I was in Vernon last week. There's people driving everything all over the place. And we're not talking 25 vehicles an hour. We're talking 1 to maybe an hour during the 2 or 3 hours that it's busy. Just to fill you in, the thought was on the city property to have them build hangars, just to get a spark to light the fire. Because at the moment we have no private hangars, and there's lots of people who they have planes in Chilliwack. They want to have their plane here. They live here, but they don't want to outlay the $150,000 or whatever it takes to build a hangar. And so to get people's juices flowing and some excitement, the thought from the committee and from staff was to have them build hangars on a lot that they can't lease out anyways, and then lease out those hangars profitably to kind of kickstart the development of private hangars on the airport.
Two things, I guess. One would be
Okay.
so two things that respond is, one, the driving on the runway as a pilot and experiencing that, like especially in Panama House and other small towns where the airport is sort of integrated in town, and you have to have separation from the airport and people walking their dogs. And I think the fencing, I don't know where the plan of it is, but as long as you have sort of a fence where people have to access the airport, once those people are inside, I don't think there's a problem with people driving. Those people generally know what they're doing. They're inside the fence for a reason. So, but it's important if you're going to expand and have people driving that the fencing meets a requirement that keeps sort of the general looky-loos and people out. So the development to that east end that you're talking about makes sense. As long as fencing is good, because without fencing, you end up having a lot of people come and more planes and more. The other issue, like I know that there's several people in several airports that would love to have a hangar for their planes. Leasing, I think a small lease payment is probably pretty nice, but at this day and age, people have really expensive planes. Generally, even a 172 is $100,000, just a simple four-seater that used to be, $30,000. People that have these planes have generally the capital to put out, and I'm not saying, like you said, a Spark is a great idea, but I know people have planes worth $200,000-$300,000. For them to build a hangar and a T hangar share a cost of a small, 3 or 4 T hangars. They're paying a third. It costs them $60,000 to $70,000. They own it. They know they can sell it, make a little profit. That is a real trend that's coming with people with planes, because planes have gone up exponentially, and to be able to have their own hangar and as an asset, sell the plane with the hangar when they retire. And if that part on the west end has the paved taxiway going along, you still have access. I don't know how big that piece of property is, the parcel that you can lease or sell lots or people that can build T hangars. From a point of view of people with planes right now, it's not that expensive to build the wooden T hangars as opposed to the metal, and then they have an asset. A lot of people have planes, they write off against their own companies. It's not expensive as you might think for people that have a hangar compared to a plane. So as a point of investment.
Here's my gut, and I don't know that this is right because I don't have the aviation experience you have, but from a kind of an order development side, if we can really try pushing and encouraging private development of hangars to infill this capacity, I like the idea of not using that immediately in case, if we find that we're getting what we need from the private side, it still allows that to be used potentially as your helipad, heliport area because as soon as the hangar goes in there, you've lost that option. So I'd love to see if we can be working with private parties to get our development of hangars up to the point where we're meeting the needs of the community. Not just the community, as you guys have said, that there's planes all over that would come here if the opportunity was there. So if we can kind of absorb some of that capacity on the private side, if we find that there's still tons more to look at, then I think it makes perfect sense for us to look at the hangar on that site at that point. But I just have some hesitancy because I especially heard it with fire season, like there would be some advantage to having some dedicated helicopter assets as well as directly integrated into the airport. But that's my personal thoughts on it. This hasn't gone to council yet in terms of order, but I think that it makes a lot of sense for us to try knocking out kind of the city lease parcels. The city also owns 2 parcels here that would be potential sale parcels as opposed to just lease parcels, with the exception that we need to subdivide off the nose for the septic disposal area that we had just completed. So we've got some options. We want to make sure that we advance them. I just continue to have some reservation about putting in the hangar on the one spot that is kind of already reserved for helicopter use.
You brought up John Lauder. He's a great guy. He's been talking for years about doing it. What he probably needs is somebody from staff, maybe you or someone from council, maybe gathering a meeting of people who are interested in building a T hangar because they're much cheaper. And then because he talks about it, but he doesn't know how to go about it. He needs some hand holding and some walking through that. So my recommendation is John Lauder is a great guy to kind of start with and see if you can get 6 other guys together with him, lease that property, build a hangar.
Yeah, I think that it's good feedback, and as I've been around you guys more, I'm starting to hear a lot of these same names coming up over and over again, right? It's a small, tight-knit community that really is passionate about aviation in our city, and so I think that as it becomes clear that one party is moving forward with a lease of a parcel, I think that there's going to be, I'd be surprised if you guys didn't know about it the next day, even if I had never told you. That's just the type of community that it is in my experience. So whether it's us coordinating it or others coordinating it privately, I think that opportunity will come, Jeff.
The last thing is, as a pilot side, this is a beautiful place to come into. You have a beautiful paved runway. It's long. It points into the wind. Generally, whichever way the wind is changing time of day. You have fuel that's automated. I don't have to do a call out, have somebody come and charge me $50. That's that automated system. You've got a taxiway when it's extended. It'd be nice. It's safer to have a taxiway on both ends because you're not backtracking and someone else is coming in. So the safety point of view, to extend that paved runway for us as pilots is a huge safety factor. Don't forget that part of it. It's not just for helicopters to park on, but it's a safety factor for people to backtrack not on the runway but on a taxiway, and that's what taxiways are for. So the only thing that whole plan of that airport is missing, you've got everything. Once the fencing up, I'm not sure about your lighting plan, but it's just hangars. From a pilot point of view, nobody wants to leave their plane outside in the sun that you get here, the sand, wind blowing.
You guys have made that super clear. Tie downs don't cut it in the long run. It's time for some hangars. And so I'm 100% on board, and I'm not trying to shirk that. What I want to do, we'll put it forward to the council. We'll get some pricing. We'll talk it through. When we've got plans, and by and large, a lot of that 2006 plan made sense. It's just that nothing ever happened with it. I have some reservations about deviating from plans unless there's a really good reason to do so, and where we haven't tested the private market because we had all these obstacles in the way that we're just now clearing out. Part of me wants to see if the plan itself can come to fruition, but if it doesn't, I've got no objections to recommending putting hangars in there. I just think that trying to allow as much future thinking as possible while still meeting the needs on the hangar side is probably it's an approach that makes sense to me at least.
Any other comments? There is one comment because you mentioned the runway. Are we going to hear from Andrew about a few things?
Sure.
Here's, if we're moving off this topic, there's one more thing I just want to add about the runway. Well, Mr. Chairman, if you want to add that somewhere.
Andrew, did you have something?
Sorry, I didn't listen. Did you have a question for me, Jeff?
Yeah, it's actually a question. The two frost heaves in the center are getting worse, noticeably worse. Even just these last rains, the landings have become problematic, at least my little aircraft, and I've watched a few other aircraft land in them. Is there something that we can do to kind of level them off? Because there's just two of them, and then what happens is you get thrown up into the air at about 60 miles an hour, your aircraft can't fly at that speed, so it crashes down on the next one. When it bangs because you're going up on that next heave, and then it's a bit...
Sounds fun, Jeff. I don't know what you're worried about.
It's lots of fun, but I've watched a couple of young pilots come in, and it's a bit shocking. It's like, whoa! I was just wondering if there's something cheaper we can do, or do we have to dig it all down?
Well, there are a few issues, and the last time I spoke of this was with Ian Gordon. It was right around the time we crack sealed the runway itself, so last year in the spring sometime. And we discussed, the maintenance that we would do on this could potentially create a bigger bump. Like we could cut it. What we would normally do ourselves is we cut it out, repack the surface underground and re-asphalt it. But anytime you do any, as you can see from the city, anytime you do minor repairs, you can never guarantee you've got the same compaction as you do on the rest of it. So to cut out a piece like that, put an asphalt in, could potentially make it worse. But having said that, if it is, at the time Ian had thought, it's okay for now. The main issues that the pilots had was the cracks in the runway. So I just left it and hadn't heard about it until just now. So no, there's definitely things that can be done. They're probably a little bit out of our ability. We would have to call in a contractor. And I could get some details for you guys, but I just don't have the answer right now, I guess.
For me, I mean, can you shave the top? Like it's a heave, right? Can you shave it? How thick is that asphalt? Can you shave it? Because as you walk the runway, you can barely tell. But when you're moving at 60, 70 miles an hour, your aircraft can tell, right? It's a heave more than anything else. There's a way to flatten it off, or
you can shave asphalt, but you're going to leave a roughness to the surface. You can't shave it and have a smooth surface at the same time. But having said that, yeah, there's an answer somewhere. I just don't have it for you right now, but let me look into a few things and see options or what would be the best way to deal with it, especially if it's getting worse. Another thing Ian had mentioned to me back then was he was around when that runway was paved, and there were issues at the time that there wasn't proper compaction underneath that runway. So he had said, like you had mentioned earlier, having 737s come in, and it's nowhere near weight rated for a larger plane like that. So yeah, no, absolutely, I could look into the best way to repair it, but also, are there any in your plans or in your ideas, or any desire to have a higher weight rating for the runway where you want to do a larger job than just those two little repairs?
Personally, I think we've batted that around as a committee. It's gone to council. The runway is sufficient for what we want in the foreseeable future. And the advice we got from staff, I think from Charlie, was when you start working on the whole base, it's a massive job. And Ian Gordon, who goes back historically with the airport a lot longer than I do, says most of the base is actually just clay, and that's why you get these bit of heaves. The minute water gets underneath that tarmac, it just starts flowing away. So personally, I like the length. It's 4,000 feet. That's doable for almost every aircraft that I could see in Merritt's future. It's just those heaves that are the issue at the moment.
And they are getting worse?
I sense they're getting worse. Now, as you know, I've taught 3 of my girls how to fly this summer, so I've been flying lots and lots out of Merritt Airport. And especially when you take off a runway 21, which is the one facing south, most airplanes are about 60, 65 miles an hour at those points of that heave, and it does kind of throw you up in the air. When you're running north on runway 03, you don't feel it because you're off already, or you're already fast enough that if you do get pushed up a little bit, you're up and you just take off.
Yeah.
I watched a King Air land, and you could definitely tell when they hit it, it was like, woo! You could see all the passengers go up and down. The King Air holds about 10 people, and they were definitely moving up and down on those frost heaves.
Yeah. That's something definitely then we should put into our maintenance plan for sure. It's getting close to the end of the season now. It might be a little tricky to get something done before winter, but we can put it high on the list for the spring and figure something out to make things better for you.
Yeah, it's not a safety issue at the moment.
Okay.
It could be in another 2 years if it continues to degrade at the rate it's going. But it's not a priority like you have to do this month. You're not going to stop people from landing because of it. It's uncomfortable, especially for either larger aircraft like a King Air or my little aircraft, which right at that point it can't fly, but it gets thrown up into the air because of them.
Yeah, fair enough. Yep. Absolutely.
Sean, did you have something?
Only, I mean, and I think this is ultimately something that we've got policy for other areas in terms of road maintenance and things like that, sidewalk maintenance, where we've got things fairly well established for what our thresholds are. Once the jut is over, I don't know, 1.5 inches, that's when you shave it down or whatever. Yeah, inch. And so we don't have anything like that for the airport that says, all right, here's the level at which we definitely take action. And so we really appreciate this feedback. We genuinely do. My question was largely answered by you. It was, is this a quality of life thing or a safety thing? And it sounds like currently quality of life, progressing towards safety potentially in the future. So that's what I really wanted to know, because of course the last thing I want is to be putting anybody in an unsafe situation, though recognizing that it could become that is useful. So, thank you.
Good, excellent feedback. We haven't gone on to the lighting part of the staff report yet. Did you want to go on to that?
I saw it all as being fairly lumped, Councillor. So if there is any questions on any of those items, excellent. I'm going to say that it will be part of our 2022 plan. Hopefully we'll get some grant funding. If we don't, we'll build it anyways. That's pretty much what we're going to be recommending on the staff side and what council can anticipate when budget season comes.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything else to do with that? No, all right. Let's move on forward then. 4.1, and Stephanie, our economic recovery advisor, would you like to take over? And Jeff, can I get you to take over?
Thank you, Councillor Christopherson. Just gonna share my screen. Maybe I'll try something the other way.
Now that's promising.
Yay. Good. All right. The interesting thing is having come to this meeting for the first time ever and not being a pilot or someone who gets to go up to the airport regularly. I've already written a bunch of notes. The reason I am here today is to get some input from this committee for economic development strategy. This is so interesting. I'm just going to click and see what happens. Oh, there we go. All right. So I'm going to be really quick. This is actually going to be an abbreviated version of what I've been doing around the community, mostly in this room, with a variety of different industry sectors. We started actually with the street market on September 18th and gathered information from the general public because we were just getting started, so we didn't have all of our information or questions that we wanted to ask, but we wanted to take advantage of that opportunity. And I know actually Jeff and his wife and his girls were there, so we did already get some good input from some people who know some things about the airport. But we are engaging other sectors in the community and all ages as well. So I just wanted to let you know that. I'm going to do a really brief what we've heard. And I actually think I've cut the SWOT out of here. So I've cut a lot of things out of your presentation. Not to say that you can't contribute more information than what I was planning to ask you, but I really, really want your input as an airport advisory committee. And one of our focus areas is the commercialization of the airport. So the city's been doing a number of engagement activities over the last 18 months, primarily with our OCP update, which is drawing closer to its completion. We also completed an active transportation network plan, housing needs report, and various virtual town halls were conducted in this past winter. So lots of things have come out of this. So not just looking at the airport, but you can see some improvements for our city center. Always that beautification, revitalization, sod improvement program. I'm not going to read them all, but this information will already feed into what I'm doing as well. So we're not going to ignore the info we've already gathered. We want to make sure we utilize what we've already collected, and it will feed into this plan as well. A couple of other things, not so much around the industry side of it, although education is an industry in itself. But really, we want to also take into consideration quality of life in the city of Merritt. Sometimes that gets are not considered necessarily when you talk about economic development, but it is what keeps people here and attracts people here. So again, another list of what we have heard. This you may have seen, I'm not sure if it was shared with the committee, but council approved for 2022 our strategic focus areas, and under economic prosperity, we have this statement, we will improve economic prospects for new and existing businesses and work to attract new, clean industry that provides high-paying jobs to residents. We see the revitalization of our city center as essential to the long-term economic health of our community, and will work to increase the number of people living, working, and visiting our city center. The Nickel Valley has massive tourism potential, and we will work collaboratively to realize that potential. And so under that, we have some specific focus areas, as mentioned sort of in that introductory statement. Vibrant city centers, so this is going to be a focus. I mentioned that the strategic focus areas are for 2022, but the economic development strategy will be a 5-year plan. So we do want to look beyond the current into more future planning. And a lot of things that we want to do in our city center will have a longer term vision. We also have economic diversification and business attraction and retention, and I present those together because they do overlap a little bit. Economic diversification, of course, being bringing in industries that complement the industries that we already have, but so that we're not just relying on 2 to 3 large employers and getting into the risk of what happens when trends in industry change and shutdowns happen and that sort of thing. I also have really been focusing under the business attraction and retention to really focus on the retention piece. I know our current business owners are concerned that the city is always looking to attract and not concerned about who's already here. So we are looking to build on what we already have and how to support the businesses that we already have. And what other businesses or industries could we attract that would support those industries and businesses we already have. And I'll give you a rundown of the industry focus areas as well. And then, of course, like many communities, we need to have a focus on housing as well. And a lot of things are happening right now, we know, to look at increasing our residential housing supply. So it is something that's in the immediate future, but will be a longer range as well. Now, not to make you guys, not to make you guys smaller on the list, but just to fit it on the same screen. Commercialization of the Merritt Airport falls under, in my opinion, under economic diversification and under that business attraction and retention piece. So that's why it's sort of off to the side there, pointing to those two other bullets. And then the other focus that we have that will be included in this plan is harmonious tourism strategy, which also falls under those two pieces. So lots going on. Our target industries, and these are really broad industry sectors. Some of them are future sensing, so where are we looking to grow, what are we looking to attract, and some of them are looking on what we already have and how can we build and support what we already have. So I'll just run down the list. Agriculture and forestry, construction, healthcare. On the healthcare side, that actually includes three very distinct industries in itself. So we're looking at primary health, wellness, and social services. Light manufacturing, retail and hospitality, also very huge. Hospitality includes food and beverage and accommodation, so lots of businesses in there. Remote work and home-based, I think this is sort of a newer industry sector, but Merritt's location makes us an attractive place to work from, but also COVID has presented this opportunity to market ourselves as a home-based place to work from. Tourism and entertainment, as mentioned in the previous slide, that harmonious tourism strategy is one of our goals and focus areas, and how can we grow and support, again, what we already have. So there's some natural assets we have in the Nicolet Valley that we're not necessarily promoting or encouraging people to take advantage when they come to visit, and we'll be looking at those as well. And then of course with our location, transportation, warehousing, and logistics. So I think from the commercialization of the airport standpoint, there's crossover into a number of these industries. So everything sort of mixes together and melds, and you don't necessarily have to look at it as one category or another. So the interesting thing was, as I said, we did start to collect some input on what do we need at the airport, and as I said, just sitting in this meeting, I've been typing and learning what else we need at the airport. The things that we've got from the community to paint on the runway the words Merritt and fuel, so that those who haven't been to Merritt know we have fuel as number one, and what airport they're coming to. So I thought that was interesting input. Lighting and fencing was on there. We know that's going to happen in the relatively near future, but I kept it in there anyway to not lose sight of it. Other potential commercialization opportunities, aircraft maintenance company potentially, a flight school. There was mention to work with NBIT on that, so I haven't chatted with NBIT about it yet, but is that an option to pursue that, or is there another flight school that could expand to the area? BC Wildfire Training would be a training hub. Hangar miniums, so it's interesting all the hangar discussions, because we've actually had some inquiries about hangar miniums, and I'm sure this group is familiar, but anyone who's not, it would be a hangar on the bottom for the airplane and living accommodation up top. So I had to Google it when I had the chat with the person, but thought it was quite interesting. And then another person actually brought up, and I think this has been done in the past, probably COVID canceled this event, an annual airport day for the public, so getting the public up there somewhat regular basis to see, especially as we do add improvements to the airport. I thought that was a great input as well. So really what I'm hoping from this committee, is there anything else that we've talked about? You've actually talked about a lot of things that I would include as sort of strategies or actions. And again, thinking sort of further into the 5-year time frame that you can think that we should look forward to. We mentioned, I made a note about the certified aerodrome, because perhaps that future thought process is making it so we don't close off that opportunity for the future, even if it's beyond 5-year scope. Not missing out on that. Are there other things that are not on your, or haven't been on your radar because they are future something. I'm just gonna actually type right on my presentation, so we'll see how that works if I can do it. I don't know what will happen if I change the screen grid.
Well, let's find out.
But I do also want to say, let me just change the slide here and see what happens to this. That it's not that I don't want your other input. So these are the kinds of questions I've been asking at my session. And really the Vibrant City Center one is an interesting one, because if we start to commercialize the airport, are we continuing to develop and keep people up at that end of town and not getting them into the city center? So there's probably some sort of strategy we need to think about for how do we get those that fly in to come into the city center as well, to shop or eat or whatever it might be, take part in activities that may be going on. So I think
We need a zip line to the city center. Everybody who flies would probably be exactly the type of person that would subscribe to that adventure.
No, would it make it that far though?
No, it wouldn't.
I think you'd end up in the river. I don't know if I can do it from this way, so I might stop presenting and then just present my Word doc. I think that might work, because my PowerPoint wasn't working, so let's just see here. I mean, it was working, but not for me to keep editing it.
Okay.
I get all my notes and some questions on there too, because I hadn't heard of King Air, so I'm going to do some search.
It's a type of airplane.
It's a type of airplane or airline?
Airplane.
Airplane, okay. This is great as an educational moment for me. All right. Other than hangars, other than some of the things that were on the list.
Jeff, did you have a question for her?
A couple things. You're not allowed to paint anything on the runway.
Is there somewhere it can
On the apron or the
Okay.
taxiways.
Okay.
I love your enthusiasm, love your plans. Thanks for listening. The community airport day, you're right, it kind of died because of COVID. Ray should probably resurrect that next season. Because it was an awesome day. We had 300, 400, 500 people out there. And we call it a community airport day because it's about community first, airport second. So we had everybody from the Antique Car Club, we had RCMP, we had lots of different type of people out there to enjoy the community and then enjoy the airport. The issue of flight school, I would love to talk further on that one. I've had some conversations with flight schools down in Langley. This is probably something that we should start hitting on pretty quickly as COVID restrictions on international travel changes. And just for the committee, I've been talking to some flight schools in Langley, because Langley is kind of the hub now of training, and it's now so busy that students are sitting with an idling aircraft paying $275 an hour for 20 minutes trying to take off because it's so busy. And then by the time they get to the practice area, that's so busy that they're going around in circles waiting to do some of their exercises. And so I've been in conversations with some of the schools saying, we're a great place in the summertime. We have NVIT that has empty dormitories. Bring your international students here, set up a sub base here in Merritt, rent from NVIT a classroom and the apartments. So your international students will be based here from May, June, July, and August. We're VFR, which means Visual Flight Rules, almost continuously right for those 4 months. So you could do training every day without a problem. And so that was the idea with NVIT and a flight school. So we can talk more about that if you want.
Okay, thank you, Jeff, that's excellent.
Right?
One of the other suggested uses of our airport, I had several discussions with a commercial pilot flies 747s for Air Canada, and he was directly involved in helping Air Canada survive the COVID crisis by moving Air Canada more into air freight. And he has visited our airport on several occasions and was considering the possibility of actually setting up shop here. And one of the things that he would be pushing for was air freight out of the Merritt Airport. And so that's another.
And could we do that with our existing base weights for freight?
Well,
It's a conversation we should have either way.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
excellent.
Good, thank you. Sounds like, are there any more comments or questions for Stephanie?
And or beyond the airport, but definitely I wanted your airport expertise.
Good, thank you. It's,
Thank you.
one other comment? No.
If you're looking for one other comment. I love your building this downtown center and how to have the airport in there. One of the things that I think the taxi companies should put up a little card, or you could put up a sign with the taxi companies in town and their phone numbers. Last week, as the weather changed, there was at least one pilot who was stuck here for 4 days. He couldn't get down to Langley. And so this is kind of the last airport you can land in before you hit the weather wall between here and the Fraser Valley. And so he was here for 4 days. But I gave him a ride off the airport because there was no number or phone number or anything for taxis or anything else. And in fact, he was one of 2 guys who were stuck here in the last 2 weeks. And so a little more information, maybe a couple hotels that give a discounted rate to trap pilots or something like that. Yeah, that's the only comment I had on that one.
In that line, with our airport, when people land there, there really is no access to, I mean, they don't have a car to go downtown at all, so it is they're kind of stuck over there, aren't they?
Yeah, especially if they don't know any taxis or there's no way, you have to walk about 2 kilometers to get to Walmart and to get onto a bus. That's kind of the closest.
This does raise one other item that I know has been talked about in the past was, is there some form of kind of formal or informal access that you could have off the airport grounds that would take, I can't remember, it might have been you that was saying it, Jeff, some more direct path to Boston Pizza is what I think I heard. But perhaps we'd have to look at that obviously from a design side, but is there anything that we could have coming off? I don't know if it works or doesn't, but.
That's exactly what I wanted to bring up, because just the other day, there was 3 aircraft in from Kelowna, and I offered a ride, but I'd have to make several trips because there was a number of them, and they chose instead to walk across the runway. And I don't know if there's an opening in the fence or if they have to climb over. Whatever the situation, I did suggest that we look at doing something on a temporary basis with the lot that the city owns for the fire hall, future fire hall purposes. If there was some way that we could allow access for aircraft onto that property to tie down, it would be an easy walk for them then to be able to get to those restaurants without having to cross over the runway. If that's not really feasible, then it seemed to me that we should have a designated pathway, clearly marked out with signage, directing them to a place where they can actually access those facilities, not having to climb over fences. That could be done quite inexpensively. And And it would be a way of letting pilots know that we're glad that they're here and we want them to use these facilities. But I think we should.
Can I ask one follow-up question to that, Ray? So if we weren't to do because I hear what you're saying about the fire hall site potentially, I always have some reservations about improving something that is going to have some degree of cost associated with it if that's not part of the long-term plan, but I'm not saying it couldn't happen. How do you do this safely, given everything that we have for where the planes would go is on the south side, and any path that's going to be on that north side? Heaven forbid, I don't want people running across runways and things like that. I imagine that's got to be out of bounds, but if there is a way that we can kind of conceive of this, design it safely, where you have a path that's running outside the obstacle limitation surface somehow, worth looking at. I haven't seen the vision of it for how you make it happen with our design unless you do something off the north end of the runway.
Yeah, it's happening anyway, whether we like it or not, as people are doing this. So.
So let's help them. Yeah.
Well,
So it's the most asked question I have when I'm at the airport by pilots flying in. How do I get to Boston Pizza? How do I get to Mr. Mike's or something like that? And I jokingly say, well, you just can walk across the runway, look both ways before you cross, and cross it. Now, here's the problem. As a city, I don't think you want to do anything official because you start running into liability issues. I don't think I know of any airport in the world that has a crosswalk on it. I mean, I don't think it happens. So to be honest, it seems to be working. People do it. All of them are pilots. They're all with pilots. They're looking both ways very carefully, and they're crossing. The fence is a small barbed wire fence that they just kind of clamber over. But as a city and as a committee, I don't think I can recommend anything that would be safety-wise, liability-wise, be safe, short of tunneling underneath the runway for a crosswalk underneath the runway. I don't see anything. Okay, so that's
a really across a runway.
That's the contrary.
Okay, but that's a roadway. I think in Europe, at Schiphol Airport, they have things like this, and I think in the UK, you have things like this.
Where you have literally no room.
That's a good picture, Greg. Greg, you're the lower guy. You can look it up. I just as a committee member.
Look, sorry, yeah, absolutely. I'm just having some fun.
As a committee member, I don't think I can recommend it from a liability safety / whole bunch of other issues.
It is a difficulty, but I know when I was principal at Nicola Canada School that we had an issue with kids who were always cutting across a farmer's land to come to school, and the entire area used it. So we asked to formalize it, and I just said, absolutely not. I'm not making any improvements on it, because as soon as I do, I'm liable. So, but it would be interesting for us to...
It's a consideration to keep in mind, though, because I know that this comes up. Perhaps as we start seeing development on that north corridor, there may be an opportunity that this becomes evident. We can address this issue.
Well, is that not...
And Greg has a free day and has nothing else to do. He could research this.
We'll go start painting lines directly on the runway according to legislation.
But is that not an issue already as soon as we start developing the properties on the north side?
I think
how do people access their
it would have to be a plane pull off on that north side, so that instead of getting off on the runway on the south and then needing to cross, they're pulling off on the north.
But it is going to become an issue, is it not, if there are businesses on the north side and people want to access them from the airport terminal or anything like that, they're going to cross the runway somehow. So is this an issue that we seriously need to contemplate, how you access
I've got to imagine that this issue has been addressed probably 50 times by every airport. You need to cross the runways at times, and so I think that maybe there's been some novel solutions out there. Maybe they just do exactly what we're doing and ignore it. But I think that that's something that if we invite feedback, if you guys have seen how it works in other communities effectively to get the chicken across the road, I would love to hear it.
Good. I think we'll leave it at that, but if the committee does come up with some interesting variations on how the chicken can cross the road, that'd be great. Thanks. Okay, are we done with that? Are there any more questions with Stephanie at all? No? Thank you, Stephanie. Really appreciate it. I hope we got some good suggestions coming from the committee. Now, we put down number 4.2, recording of traffic and voice movement discussion. And I kind of understand the traffic part, but I'm not sure with the voice movement.
I think this was an item that Jeff talked about at the previous meeting.
Actually, it wasn't me, it's Ian Gordon.
Oh, it's Ian.
Who's not here. And I
Okay.
have no information on it. Just for clarification, what it is when there is a call me on the aviation frequency, it basically records that as a call or a movement. And so you kind of know how many people are going in and out of the airport. I don't have any information on that. That was Ian Gordon.
Okay, it's basically the question I think arose because we really don't have any idea of how much traffic is happening at the airport other than if they sign the login book, which is hit and miss at the best of times. So unless there are any more comments about 4.2, we'll move along. No?
You probably record the movement just from fuel sales too, rather than just people who are signing in, so you have a record of people buying fuels, that way of monitoring traffic as well, just something.
Is everybody that uses our airport fuel up there, or is that the reason that they come, or do they come here and leave and they don't fuel up?
I think probably half people fuel up and half don't. It's just the way you're trying to keep track of how many people are coming and going. If they're not signing the book, maybe half sign the book and half don't, and half get fuel and half don't. Maybe get a rough idea from that source. But other than those two things, I don't see any other way of keeping track of the traffic. And pilots, recording their transmissions and stuff, I've never heard of that before. So I don't know how you keep track of anything traffic-wise. Just
it's an unmonitored.
Yeah, it's unmonitored. You don't even have to have a radio to come into the airport, technically. You just fly over the airport and join the downwind circuit, so, yeah.
What I think helps is we do need to look at some system to be able to better track not just for grants, which they always want to know your annual number of movements, etc. It's a pretty key metric that they look at, but for other people that may be looking to, bring whatever their commercial operation is to town, understanding what volume we have running through our airport is a pretty critical metric. And for us to say, we don't really know, it's just not terribly satisfying. And so that's why I think we jumped all over the idea. If there is some technology like that, where as part of the call-in it counts that, that would be fantastic. So, Councillor Gustafson, I'm going to propose and ask, maybe we can just bring this item forward to the next meeting when we can have, when it can be spoken to a little bit more thoroughly there. Because if there is an option like this, great. I think that would help far and above what we're getting with the logbook right now, and then adding a few extra on just as guesswork or trying to patch it together from fuel sales. So.
Yeah, I mean, what sprang to my mind was like when you do a highway count, how a little strip going across the highway to find out how many vehicles are crossing one way or another, but I don't know if that's appropriate for the airport or not. But somehow, yeah, I think the issue is there, that we need to know how much traffic is coming in and out. Andrew?
Yeah, one other option, I don't know if this has been considered, is to have a camera set up whether it's motion sensitive or not, it'd take a little time, sort of at the end of the week, someone could go through it and count how many, just another low-priced option anyway.
So maybe we can have some ideas for the next meeting that will bring fruition, because I think we do want to know what those figures are.
Yeah, and just to automate it at the lowest possible cost. And if there's a way we can automate that trigger so that every time that motion comes, it knows whether it's an airplane, or a coyote. But yeah, I think that there's some discussion here that we should have, because if we can get there, it sure would make life easier for a lot of us.
I'd only add one thing, is just from a pilot standpoint, coming in here during the winter, when I had flown when it snowed last winter and had 10 inches of snow on the plane and shoveled my way through the building, and nobody was there. You don't need to worry about planes coming and going in January. 99% of your traffic in this airport is in the summer. The fires, all this. I mean, so from a non-pilot perspective, you're thinking, oh, do planes come and go all day and every day of the year? No, it's good weather days, it's summer days, like you mentioned, the flight school, or you have to about, the number of days flying. If you want to graph really accurate, it's just a few months in the summer that you get 99% of your traffic.
Yeah.
And I think from that point of view, you probably get a pretty good idea.
Yeah. That is well evidenced by fuel sales. You watch fire season, it was a spike that was about 1,500% more than any other month. So,
Can you tell us about the fuel sales? Do you have numbers?
this is something Councillor Christopherson asked for again. I don't have numbers over and above what we had at the last meeting. I didn't get an update on fuel sales. I'll make sure to bring that as an item as part of the next meeting.
Okay, thank you.
It stayed pretty high though, relative to what it had historically been.
Great.
Can I bring up another item? I don't know if anybody is doing anything about it at this point, but we have a derelict aircraft sitting right beside the ramp in a really poor location.
I can answer for that if you like. I've just recently spoken to the fellows, I forget his last name, Dennis. He has paid his monthly fees to have his plane parked there, and I spoke to him and said, you're going to have to get it onto a tie-down with the rest of the plane. So he made it sound like it was just a couple days away, so whether it's done now or I'll check by the end of the week, but I'm kind of expecting him to put it in place by the end of the week. What he told me, and maybe you guys know the story, I guess he came into land and his front landing gear collapsed on him. So then he had, it looks like an older plane, he had some issues with an oil leak and stuff. So he said he's trying to sell the plane now, but I thought to myself, gee, that might be a tough sell if he's having these issues. But bottom line is for now, that'll be moved into position with the rest of the plane shortly. Yeah.
So was the oil leak the reason why he parked it off?
He wasn't clear about why. I don't know, because the repairs he was trying to do, I'm not sure why he had left it there so long. Yeah. Not sure.
Okay, thank you. And I think we probably already discussed 4.3, the hangars and leasing opportunities. So unless there was any more questions along with that line, I think we're at the end of our meeting. But I really, really would like to thank the committee members that the information that you're providing is invaluable to the city. It really is, because you're the feet on the ground out there, and you see what needs to happen. And for a number of years, our airport was kind of abandoned. And it's good to get feedback on what we're attempting to do with it, and to bring it up to code and find out how to use it properly. And the feedback from the committee is invaluable. So I want to thank you.
And I just wanted to add, if any of you have conversations that have kind of progressed past, you guys have good sense, so whatever point where they're actually looking to make something happen, please do connect with Stephanie or Dawn, myself. If you can, as early as you feel comfortable, punt in the city's direction, because whether it's a flight school, hangar opportunities, whatever that is, we're on the airport right now and trying to make things happen, whether it's a city leased parcel, they're interested in ownership of one of the city parcels. it's a project that's going to be happening over the course of the next few months, but we really do want to begin making connections with all of the landowners along the northern side so we can understand what their interests, development plans are, so that we can start connecting people to see some development at the airport. So just encouraging any of the committee members that hear of opportunities to send folks our direction if you have that opportunity.
Good, thank you. And I wasn't sure whether Phil was online because I never directed just to find out whether he had any input into it. If Phil is on the line and I've ignored him, I apologize. Are you there, Phil? Okay, if not.
Speaking from the past, I've had trouble being able to just do the voice, but we can hear you guys generally. But I bet Phil is there. If that's still logged on, he's listening anyway.
Well, yeah, that's I can see the stuff there. Yeah.
So he's maybe have to dial into the meeting.
Just before we close the meeting, Andrew, that box around the card reader, I paid $366 to a pilot who couldn't get fuel. He couldn't use his credit card. Mine seemed to work, and so I paid, and he paid me back the next day. But is it working?
Yes, it is almost there. Yeah, if you'd like, I can give you a little maintenance update on what we've done this summer. So we'll start with the card reader. I had some initial pricing on some fancy, nice looking ones that kind of matched the design we had there. They were a little too pricey, so I did get one. Jackson's Welding has made one up for us. It is actually complete as of a couple weeks ago, and I just haven't had the time or the manpower to get that installed. But there is one. It is made. It will be up before the winter, so I know it's dragged on a little long. The other thing is the crack sealing on the apron. We didn't quite get that completed this year, and I don't believe we're going to be able to finish it off because we've got a few other higher priority projects before winter hits. But we also got those new anchors in. I just wanted to get some feedback from you on what we've done so far, and if there's any other items. That one you mentioned already, Jeff, is I'll put that higher on the list and get some answers for you. But anything else that you might have for the maintenance side of things? Concerns or?
Just the coming into the taxiway with the improvements there. Is there a preferred area? Just sometimes you don't know if you're parking a plane on a spot that someone's paying rent for, and he may have his tie downs. Sometimes you have a sign that just says, transit parking for the day, or you hate to take somebody's spot while they're applying, and you come back and you're there staying for the weekend golfing or something, and you've taken somebody's spot. That might be a little bit handy for people coming into using the tie downs.
Thank you. Jeff, did you?
I think you did a great job on the crack sealing. Next spring, you might want to get the weeds that are coming up through the cracks before they grow to 2 feet tall. That was the only thought there. I think you did an awesome job on the crack sealing. Hopefully it's working. I mean, it's hard to tell till you have a problem, but so you did a great job.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Jeff. And at this point, that's sort of the best we could do. After that, we're looking at a repave because those cracks, as you know, are quite big. We did just do a quick little overlay on that part that was completely falling apart, and so I'm hoping that's not too big of a bump as you kind of come and go there on the apron, so that's good. Thank you. It's good to hear. And those weeds, it's amazing how quickly they grow with those cracks. And so, as you know, we get on our other approaches, get sidetracked. And I know I was up there one day, I was like, how did this happen? I was just here a few weeks ago. But once we get them completed, that shouldn't be an issue. Thank you. Good to hear.
Good. Well, thank you. And if there's no other comments,